In accordance with the rules of procedure, the debate is now adjourned and the bill is referred to the House Committee. Committee stage. Council is now in committee to continue the consideration of the schedule to the Appropriation Bill 2017. The committee will continue to conduct the sixth debate in this meeting, and then the committee will proceed to vote on the amendments to the 58 heads in the schedule to the bill. After voting on the arrangements, the committee will proceed to the seventh debate on the sums for the 58 heads standing part of the schedule, the eighth debate on clauses 1 and 2 standing part of the bill and the relevant votings, as well as the voting on the motion for the third reading. At about 1:30 p.m., the committee will conclude all debates before we proceed to the votes to the CSAs. I will suspend the meeting for about 15 minutes at about 4 p.m. today, and based on the progress of the Council, I might adjust the length of the break.
The committee now continues to conduct the sixth debate. The themes are education, manpower, youth, arts and culture and sport. At last meeting's meeting, the public officer has spoken in this debate, and one amendment proposer had spoken again. I now call upon other amendment proposers to speak again. This debate will come to a close after the amendment proposers have spoken. Dr. Lau Xiaolai, do you wish to speak again? I do. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to speak on amendments 53 and 55. To cut $71 million and $41 million respective from Head 53, and that is the funding for mainland youngsters coming to exchange programs in Hong Kong and vice versa. Every year, there are money for NGOs to apply for young people to engage in internship and exchange programs on the mainland. $112 million have been reserved in 2017 for such purposes. And the rationale for my amendments are funding is in fact for supporting the liaison office. Instead of youth work, we are actually helping them to become mainlandized. How come young expenses for young people are now subsidizing the liaison office instead? Because both schemes are approved by the Youth Commission appointed by the HAB. Last year, $112 million were spent on this, and over 60% of them were obtained by pro-establishment organizations. And looking back, checking the information, in the Youth Commission, there are many members who are also in charge or sponsors of these organizations. That means, well, on this side, funding is approved by the Youth Commission. Two organizations run by themselves. So this is collusion. They are approving money for their own organizations, and this is how resources from Hong Kong people are being swallowed by these organizations. How can we succumb to such thing? How can we condone such things? Chairman of the Commission, Mr. Lau Ming-wai, together with Fok Kai Kong, are members of the Youth Commission, so they are approving funding for their own organizations. The honorary advisor is Lau Kong-wah, so why isn't an NGO? It should be a government body instead. So on service, they are providing funding for non-profit making independent bodies. In fact, they are providing funding for themselves. These members are appointed by Lau Kong-wai. Many of them are from pro-establishment organizations. This Federation of Youth and also this organization for energizing the youth. The honorary advisors and sponsors are C.Y. Leung and Zhang Xiaoming, respectively. So they had $4.35 million from the two schemes last year. So we are sending money to the liaison office for their United Front work. And these organizers will send people to organizations outside Hong Kong to recruit participants. I don't know why they don't do that in Hong Kong. And the expenses covering air passage, accommodation, and expenses are fully subsidized, capped at $15,000 each. So this should be an internship program for young people to the mainland, and yet people are paid to recruit participants in the U.S. and Europe, fully paid by the scheme. So who would benefit subsequently? We thought that it was funding for the youth. In fact, it is subsidizing Chinese liaison office to conduct united front work, and is this something we want to see? Secondly, youth work is now planned for united front work. Now, this $71 million is meant for 3,500 participants. Each young man will get about $410 to $490 per day, depending on the destination. So even though we take the lower level, 410, we are subsidizing $12,300 per student. Now, for a young man who serves in a large company in Hong Kong, he only gets $6,000 to $7,000 a month. So this is using money to lure young people back to the mainland. If they are really engaged in internship program, that's fine. But what are they actually doing there? This exchange program, well, they're paid more than a few $100s per day. Are they spending the time sightseeing or working? Well, according to a report in 2015, the Communist Youth Party in Guangdong publicized that the scheme for young people for Hong Kong and Guangdong, 40,000 young men will take part to enhance their the sense of belonging and identity with their country, and to instill a sense of pride for their country. So this is not really internship. If they want to win the hearts of young people, perhaps the bill should be footed by the liaison office instead. Tens of thousands of young people from our university have joined this scheme organized by the Association of Youth and also the Guangdong various associations on culture, and in fact they are the organizations who got funding from these two schemes. So this is in fact infiltration by Chinese Communist Party. Why should Hong Kong people foot the bill? Thirdly, internationalization is called mainlandization. Well, whether it be a youth work or education for our youth, I don't know why the mainland is counted as part of the international community. Most of the funding and places will be for students from the mainland. I asked a question at the FC meeting of Mr. Lau Kong-wai, the Secretary for CMA. In 2018, 1,200 odd young people will go to the mainland for exchange. But if we include all places globally, there will only be 13,000. How come the number of students sent to the mainland would include all our students on exchange programs to other parts of the world? So whenever we talk about internationalization, it's actually mainlandization. What benefits can our young people get? I don't mind they go to the mainland for exchange, but how come the quota for other parts of the world is so small? The reply from the secretary was laughable. He said that not all countries would like to engage in bilateral exchange of Hong Kong, and therefore the quota is so small for other places. Well, if our objective is to nurture international horizon for our young people, then we don't mind whether it is bilateral or not. It's still okay if it is unilateral exchange program, so that our young people can be given the opportunity to widen their eyes in other parts of the world. So this is sophistry. why is the use of resources so biased by the HAB? This mode of how much can we help our young people in this way? In 2017-18, we're going to spend $100 million on mainland program and $14 million for international program. The difference is so big. So Hong Kong people's resources are used to spend on United Front work. There is a conspiracy behind it, and therefore we cannot support it. In conclusion, I agree that our young people should have opportunities of exchange and internship, whether it be in the mainland or other parts of the world, is normal. The point is we have to ensure that they have access to exchange with people with different backgrounds and cultures all over the world. We should not use this program to channel money to the Chinese liaison office for their United Front work. If they want to do so, it should they should use their own money instead of our own resources. Mr. Yip Kin Yun. Thank you. I have proposed 2 amendments to cut funding for TSA and Program 00 under Head 158. $895,000 equivalent to the money for paying the staff in Environment Bureau. I heard the Secretaries for Education's reply last week, and now is the time for conclusion of the debate. I'd like to elaborate on my proposal to cut the Secretary's pay. To cut Mr. Eddie Ng's salary is a gesture to vindicate us, to do justice for us, because we'll talk about 3 months' salary, and after these 3 months, he will still be entitled to get his very generous ex gratia end of contract payment. We have to ensure that people or secretary is accountable to the public because of the many problems and issues and the negative issues. He doesn't deserve his pay. Eddie Ng has got 2 nicknames. One is Good for Nothing, and the other one is Simon Fan. And that means he is waste of space. And this has come from the uppermost echelon of the Education Bureau, when education officials wanted to brief him on our policies and measures on education. He couldn't care less, and therefore officials made up this nickname, and this was frequently quoted by a columnist in Manpower, a local newspaper. I just want to say that education officials have had a very hard time, all because of this head of bureau, and they had to cover for him, and they could not give full play to their potential. The performance of the bureau has been greatly hampered because of this leader. The secretary hasn't been devoted to his duties. Is in fact the Secretary for Tourism in Hong Kong. He's the genuine Secretary for Tourism in Hong Kong. And that did not start when he assumed office as a Secretary for Education. When he was the chairman of a relevant committee under the Hong Kong EAA, we could already see signs. Back then, the Hong Kong EAA had to fight for recognition by other educational authorities of DSE, and then officials had to lobby overseas educational institutions. That should be the duty of our professional educational officials. Mr. Eddie Ng, although he was not a professional, he was just a chairman of the subcommittee, and he fought hard to be part of the delegation. When he first assumed office in the EB, he stressed that he had to go on duty visits. Other things could leave for the time being, but he had to go on overseas visits. Well, when he first assumed office, there was the task of giving 15 years of free education. That's the promise by Siwa Leung and his platform. He said that he had to go on overseas visits. One of the destinations was Vietnam. To learn from KG education in Vietnam, why is it such an important thing? Even officials from the Bureau were baffled. Looking back the past few years, Eddie Ng, Secretary for Education, had made so-called duty visits numerous. From 2012-13, he made 4 visits, and the number grew to 17 times in 2016-17. The total expenses involved in these 5 years was as much as $3.16 million compared to his predecessor, Mr. Michael Soon. Well, he made only 17 visits, and 4 years of visits are only $1 million. That's a big difference.
Over the years, have you ever heard of the permanent secretary or the undersecretary leading the delegations? Most of these visits are headed up by Mr. Eddie Ng, and there are delegations that don't need him as the leader. He's still going there. About a month or so ago, he was arranging for an overseas visit towards the end of his term. This kind of attitude is not the right attitude to his work. He doesn't go anywhere. Last March, there was an ISTP meeting in Berlin. There's International Summit on Teaching Profession. So it is an international conference on teaching profession. In 2011, the U.S. started this, and it was held in New York for the first time. The world attached a great deal of importance. Hong Kong was represented in the meeting, and this is now held by OECD. The education ministers from scores of countries are attending, and this is an important and effective international conference. Professor Chin Kai-ming from Hong Kong U also gave prominent coverage to that in his column. I received notifications or reminders from the organizing party whether the Secretary for Education would be attending. I was surprised why I was asked, and it was only there that I discovered that the Secretary wasn't there. And the organizing party told the attendees that the next event will be held in Hong Kong. But I've never heard anything from the Secretary about this event. And I was surprised, and I asked the OECD organizing party what happened. I was told that the Secretary for Education never bothered to respond to inquiries from the organizing parties. And in fact, a year or so ago, everybody knew that it's going to be held in Hong Kong. People had a high expectation of that, but the Secretary never bothered to reply, and eventually there was no formal application for this to happen in Hong Kong. So eventually they moved this to Scotland. Now that's fine. It doesn't have to be held in Hong Kong in the first place, but this kind of evasive attitude leaves a bad taste in the mouth in the international community, and this is bringing shame and disgrace to Hong Kong. Let's come back to home. here in Hong Kong, what is the relationship with LegCo. Over the years, Eddie Ng was not working hard enough and never bothered to meet LegCo members. I lodged a complaint with the CS, Mrs. Carrie Lam, and asked why he never bothered to meet LegCo members. We all understand that many policy bureaus would make it a point to meet LegCo members and brief them on the way forward, on legislative programs and so on in the coming years. Over the years, I can count how many briefings we've been given by the Education Bureau. As a member from the Democratic camp, I didn't have the opportunity to share my views with the Secretary. Now, even a heavyweight pro-establishment members have complained likewise. Now, we understand that Mr. Lam Tai-Fai, chairman of the Education Panel for the last term, Mr. Lam also complained that there was a lack of opportunity to communicate with Eddie Ng because he never bothered talking to members. I think the most serious one is at the beginning of April this year. There was a round of attack on me online. There were attacks being circulated, and one of them is the harm caused by the Professional Teachers Union and Yip Kin Yun. They were trying to smear me, and we're quite used to this kind of circulation of rumors online. It was later that we found that Mr. Eddie Ng was part of it, and he was trying to attack members from the functional education functional constituency, and this has to be a big scandal. I understand that Mr. Ng is nearing the end of his term. I don't really want to waste too much time, and I'm sure that people can exercise their judgment, those who receive these kind of texts. But as an accountable official, as as a secretary, I think it is the first time that a secretary is part of an attack on LegCo members. Mr. Ng is not concentrating on his core business. He didn't attend the hearings, the deputations hearings for the whole length of them. Now, we discussed the children's suicide, and he attended half of the hearings. As a secretary, like LegCo members, will face a lot of issues, and the issues are happening concurrently. I think we have to weigh up the significance of the events. As a secretary, how on earth can you decide to stay away from the education panel for the public hearings? He attended an evening reception at Shantou as one of the guests of honors. Today, we have a number of officials here, and there is no sight of Mr. Eddie Ng on hand to listen to members' views. Mr. Chairman, the list of Mr. Ng's problems is endless. We've heard a lot about it. But I'd like to say that Mr. Ng's problem is exactly Mr. C.Y. Leung's problem. Mr. Ng was appointed as Secretary for Education, and C.Y. Leung never cared about his performance. He has replaced two secretaries, but has done nothing about Eddie Ng at all. For 5 years, the education sector has progressed no further, and I think the main problem lies with Eddie Ng. I hope I can take this opportunity to be fair to the people of Hong Kong and let them know the true face of the Secretary and what he has done over the years. He should be held responsible morally, legally, and so on. Hong Kong is an important international city. We should have a good enough education system. We should have a good enough education minister. I like to say that all public officers should know the extent of their responsibilities. I like to urge those who are dedicated not to be afraid of shouldering responsibilities. If we shy away from our responsibilities, then we end up with people like Eddie Ng, and this is something that Hong Kong cannot afford to have. Thank you. Mr. Ted Hui, you'd like to speak again? Thank you. In this segment of the debate, I'd like to mention Head 156, Subhead 000, to resolve to slash $8.9 million. That's equivalent to 3 months of the education for education's 3 months' pay. I'm slashing the Secretary's remuneration, and not because I want to do something in the heat of the moment. It is because the Secretary should be held responsible for the lack of progress in the education sector, and he should be held responsible for not communicating with LegCo members. And the whole education sector has been lagging behind for an extended period of time. I'm really slashing Mr. Ding's remuneration. And it's not only me. There is a whole team of LegCo members who are trying to slash his pay. There is attempt to slash the printing costs and so on for the TSA. Mr. Ding, maybe he's attending the 20th anniversary events. He's not courageous enough to face members here. I think this reduction is warranted. I meant to respond after hearing from Mr. Ng. Mr. Ng is really leaving us hopping mad. He didn't attend at the whole length of the public hearing regarding student suicide. He attended instead the anniversary event in Shantou. I read from the media that there was the CS, Mr. Matthew Cheung, and other secretaries. I mean, the fact that he doesn't attend should not present any problem, but he chose to be there. The reason is that the Education Bureau promotes lifelong planning and career planning. There should be closer collaboration with the business sector to see whether there would be opportunities available for the students for attachment. I think this is a wholly ridiculous response. Let me put this to the Secretary or the Education Bureau. Did Eddie Ng talk with the President of the Chamber about education on that evening? Has he said a word about the young people's opportunities? Has he ever told us anything about cooperation with the chambers and do more about the lifelong planning? Never did I hear anything from him about it. Now, he attended this Shantou anniversary celebration event. He said he's talking about the lifelong planning for the students. I wanted to find out whether there would be opportunities available for the kids. If you look at the yellow page, the Shantou Association supported Stanley Lee and Wilson Orr's team and Kwok Wai Keung, Stephen Ng's team. Now, what sort of chamber is this? And what is so important about this association? What is so important that he chose to stay away from the hearing and attend the event there? That's precisely the reason why I have to speak and really express my severe criticism of Mr. Ng. This incident shows that some officials can be so ridiculous, can be so unreasonable. It is precisely this kind of attitude, it's precisely this cheeky attitude on the part of Mr. Ng that has been detrimental to education sector in Hong Kong. We ended up with no progress. We ended up with only endless arguments. Now, we heard the emotional outbursts from the parents during the public hearings.
A few days ago, we met Matthew Chang and the Undersecretary for Education. And together with members from different parties, we discussed the issue of TSA again. Well, we might reluctantly accept it, but if some parents and schools not to take part, that should not be a violation of the rules, and they should not have to face any consequences. This is something parents want to hear. Of course, the Secretary did not attend that meeting, and the Chief Secretary and Undersecretary for Education did not make any promises. I think myself and some other members were being way too naive. We thought that a meeting can change what the officials are thinking. On TSA, we are no longer talking about education. This is not about theory or the form of assessment for students or how we can avoid drilling. The government is only thinking about phase and bureaucracy. C.Y. Leung said it can be shelved till after the 1st of July. It's obvious that he's jeopardizing the parents and students. We are not talking about education at all. We are talking about political struggles and bureaucracy. As a parent myself, I'm infuriated. A lot of members want to deduct the printing costs for TSA or the salary of Eddie Ng. I hope that the next term government would really listen and be careful when they choose the officials. Recently, a government official told me that there's no need to talk to the secretary. You can just talk to me. That would be more effective. That's my interpretation. And what the official implied was that Edding cannot even gain any respect from his team. You should return 3 months of salary. That's public money. You should return it to the people. That's why I said that the deduction of 3 months' salary is not a gesture, but a justified decision. Even though I'm still a relatively new legislator, from my experience, a lot of secretaries are willing to meet and talk to members. Even if they cannot make it, they would ask one of the senior AOs to attend. With the exception of Eddie Ng, he refuses to answer calls, and he's always absent. Well, I think it's a waste of time to talk about him or criticize him. And what government official would find a waste of time even to be criticized? So I do not want to waste my time as well. I'd like to talk about another amendment under head 95 subhead 000. I want to deduct the total annual budget of the Antiquities and Monuments Office. As I said before, Hong Kong needs a holistic review and reform on our policy on antiquities and monuments. Mr. Tet-Hui, your amendment does not belong to this session, so please stay on topic.
呢個修正案，
你講你係
This is, you are talking about Head 95. This is not, well, this is the sixth debate. You talked about the amendment on Head 95. Head 95 doesn't belong to Session 6. Well, I'm referring to Amendment number 83. Deduction on the annual operating budget of the Antiquities and Monuments Office. The AMO's work is substandard. The most precious antiquities and monuments are gone. The AMO has conveniently ignored the valuable constructions. We saw a lot of non-official residences or community constructions or buildings. Well, the AMO is creating historical information to help the Urban Renewal Authority or Development Bureau destroy them. So that is my experience on a community level with the AMO. As I said earlier, the head of the AMO is the Secretary for Development himself. He doubles as the head of the AMO. So it means that the AMO has to listen to the Development Bureau and Urban Renewal Authority. So is the purpose of the AMO about development or to preserve heritage? I think it's the former. By making this deduction, we want to tell the society that the AMO is substandard. We need an in-depth discussion and reform on the entire regime on conservation of antiquities and monuments. We need more experts in history, anthropology, etc. And for experts on the issue in the AMO, they have been reluctant to publish any information, and they refuse to talk to the public. For instance, in an old monument building, the estimated age was misestimated for more than 1 century. I'm not sure whether the motive was to help the Development Bureau or URA demolish the building, or whether it was just a mistake. The officials belong to the relevant professional grades. I think they are a disgrace to themselves. If they are to skew their professional knowledge because of the preferences of the head of AMO or URA, I think they are disrespecting their own expertise. So I propose to deduct the relevant expenses. The government might say that without the budget, then all conservation efforts would be suspended. But the truth is, like other amendments, the government can acquire temporary allocations and reform the entire AMO. The AMO is in an embarrassing situation, and in my resolution under Head 95, it's under the LCSD, and that's why the president thought I'm on the on the wrong topic. The AMO is vested under the LCSD, but they have to listen to the Development Bureau. So they are really in limbo. So with the Secretary and Chief Secretary here today, I hope you can listen to public views on policy on antiquities and monuments. Thank you. Mr. Nathan Law, do you wish to speak again? Thank you, Mr. Leung. I will continue to speak on youth policy in Hong Kong. And I want to talk about Head 53, the deduction of the budget of the 2017 to 18 International Youth Exchange Program by about $2.9 million. I offered some comments to the Education Commission, and since the scope was very wide, not everything could be covered. So this time I'd like to talk about youth policy and the International Youth Exchange Program and programs such as the Youth Mainland Exchange Subsidy Scheme. There were earlier reports that the budget for the Mainland Youth Exchange Program increased substantially in recent years from 2 million to 4, and the internship program has a budget of $70 million. Dr. Lau Siu Lai submitted a question earlier on the reasons on the increase of budget for these mainland exchange programs. The government said that the additional funding is due to extra demand. For the other program, International Youth Exchange Program, you have maintained similar budgets in recent years. So does it mean that people are rushing to the mainland and they have no interest in making international exchanges? That's not the case. And the government launched a new IYEP. The government only increased the budget for mainland exchange programs, but they have ignored international exchange programs. This is not about demand or need. There's a political agenda, and there are vested interests. So in future reviews, I hope the government will genuinely promote such exchange programs. We need to see what young people in Hong Kong truly need. If you talk about increased demand, they yearn for more international exchange tours. According to the Youth Commission, the IYEP started in 1979. It used to be called the Commonwealth Youth Exchange Program. It was subsequently extended beyond Commonwealth countries, and it was renamed as IYEP. So these were very different from the mainland tours widely reported, which involved a lot of eating and partying. And under the IYEP, exchange activities would be organized with the local governments, and local youth organizations are not involved. So political agendas or vested interests could be prevented because you are working directly with foreign governments, and that's why the program is of high quality. And there would be reciprocal visits as well. So such exchanges are two-way in nature. Other countries will also send deputations to Hong Kong. So the program has been positive. So IYEP is certainly very meaningful. When the government addressed members' questions recently, I had some doubts. In the current financial year, the budget of the program increased substantially by 62% to $2.92 million. We asked about the reason, and in reply, the government said, this is part of the celebrations for the 20th anniversary for Hong Kong's handover, so more young people can take part in exchange programs and they can consider visiting even further countries. So my first question is, what does it have to do with the anniversary of our handover? And a lot of people have pointed out that very often these celebrations do not serve their real intent.
This IYEP, what has it got to do with the reunification? This is really mind-boggling. And then the administration claims that they will go to further away places. Well, the furthest away is already in Europe, and if it is still more remote, like you talk about the polar regions, I don't think that is the real reason. I move this amendment because I think the administration didn't take it serious. I asked for more information. You told me that it's for celebrating the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR, and that they would go to farther away places. I hope that the administration can be more serious and be better prepared in answering our questions. Well, even cleaning up the roads, you talked about the celebration of the Hong Kong SAR and concert and so on and so forth. This is indeed a very bad response. All right, there would be close to $3 million dollars added to this scheme. Many people query safety and insurance matters and whether the contractor is trustworthy. These are all important considerations. In the past 3 years, the same organization has been granted the contract by means of providing a bid. So after liaison with these countries, you need an organization to carry out the scheme. And then the contractor won the contract by just giving a bid, and we don't know whether the whole process is transparent and fair. So this is about the exchange programs. The HAB has refused to tell us how money on youth development is spent meaningfully, and to tell the public how these exchange programs, those to the mainland in particular, are what for, what are the objectives and also the benefits to the participants. Now, for the funding scheme for youth exchange in the mainland, there are some examples. Last year, an organization was granted funding for an exchange program in the mainland. 6 months afterwards, they came back to visit, and $4.7 million was spent. And then there's an other young association for NT. There was a 2-week exchange program to Beijing. 50 participants and $450 million was spent. Another one was meant for 150 participants, and there's 50, and they got the same funding, same amount of funding. So what are the criteria for giving sponsorship? Have you do they care about the ratio between learning and sightseeing activities. And the HAB has no desire to review the system. Every year, these community organizations are granted money on the same basis. And as Dr. Lau Silai said, the rationale or the justifications are very dubious. Perhaps they are just giving money to fatten these affiliated organizations just as a means to channel favors to these bodies. And for these exchange programs, another ridiculous point is everything has got to do with celebration of establishment of Hong Kong SAR, such as a visit to the giant panda reserve in Sichuan. All these are related to the celebration of the handover. So I support Ms. Lau Silai's proposal to cut funding for these two schemes, and also an amendment to cut the funding for IYEP, I said just now. Now, $100 million will be spent to expand the IYEP. This is a new plan. Well, $100 million may be just a drop in the ocean compared with this very big budget. Talk about hundreds of billions of dollars. Still, I want to know how the government is going to spend this new provision. We're told that $3 million will be spent for this year. Full stop. And how about that $100 million? Well, they will be spent in the coming 6 years by installments, but they have not told us what will be the layout of the outlay of the spending, and what new ideas are behind the scheme. Will the expenses be increased gradually? Well, we don't have any details. Now, even if you are working in the private sector, if you want $100 million from your boss for a scheme, well, you just tell your boss, I have no plan for how the money will be spent. For the first year, it will be $3 million. And your boss will for sure ask you, why don't you ask for $3 million in the first place and see how it goes before you ask for the balance? And that's exactly why we asked for their plan. So it is hardly acceptable if they want to spend public money in this way. And this scheme is different from the old scheme. It's similar to the YE in the mainland scheme. So they support organizations to organize exchange programs to other countries. Now, if the same logic applies to IYEP, this is really a chance for pro-establishment organizations to get all the funding, and it will be an overseas version of the YE in the mainland funding scheme. So I wanted to move an amendment to cut this $100 million. But the ruling by Mr. Leung was the amendment did not involve draft expenses for this year, and therefore it was ruled out. This is ridiculous because they're asking for $100 million to be spent in the coming 6 years. So they applied for $100 million in the first place, whereas for this year they only could spend $3 million. This type of ruling would restrict a member's ability to comment on government's proposed spending. Mr. Leung, you exercise his power as the president of this council. In fact, he is colluding with the executive to ban or to cut opportunities for monitoring the executive's way of spending. Now, for our cultural policy, I'd like to say something about it as well. The provision will be increased by 0.5% compared with the last year, and the funding is severely biased towards the large organizations. No, I don't want to cut spending for them, but we have to take care of small-scaled arts groups that do not get a lot of support. Very often they are funded by the Hong Kong ADC. They have a scheme, art space, in an industrial building in Wong Chuk Hang. Art space provided to groups on a concessionary basis. Well, they can rent the space at nominal rent for creativity activities, but not for any performances. And the space is limited, and artists have to return to their own studios for rehearsals. Even if they've got the money, they have to find venues for performances. So they have overlooked the genuine need of the arts sector. So I urge the administration to provide funding not just for the 9 major arts companies. They should also help the smaller groups, and the policy on industrial buildings and commercial buildings have affected these small groups, and they really need support from the administration. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. Thank you. Madam Deputy. Well, a parliament can do anything with the exception of turning a man to a woman. But now, really, instead of a male president, we have a female Madam Deputy sitting here. All right, the Madam Deputy, you're here. We're close to the end of this debate. Yes, it's impossible to turn a man to a woman, but this has already happened. No matter how competent, no matter how strong a parliament is, if once the president is on the side of the executive, then the whole parliament is made incompetent or useless. This legislature is entirely broken and manipulated and controlled by the executive. I'd like to talk about cutting the pay and expenses for the Labor Department. Well, because our workers need standard working hours. You may say that I have no justifications. No, let me tell you, places where I have the longest working hours, I will leave out the countries. Well, Hong Kong, 50.11, Bombay, 43.78, Mexico City, 43 odd, New Delhi, 47.5, Bangkok, 45.13, Bombay, Dubai, and 42.03, Taipei, 41.17, Jakarta, 40.42, and then another place 40.3. So I've covered all 5 continents, strolling different countries. Our workers have the longest working hours by far. That's the consequence of lack of standard working hours. Once we have standard working hours, we will certainly fare much better. We won't be on this list of places with longest working hours. But we don't have standard working hours here. Secretary, when you were a commissioner, you didn't work on this. Now you are the Secretary for Labour and Welfare. You are not making this happen. Some Pan-Democrats met with Mrs. Carrie Lam and talked about this. And she said, I'm not going to work on standard working hours. I won't work on things impossible. Well, Siwa Leung deceived FTU, and luckily he got 150 votes from FTU in the C race. Now, he has not delivered his promise. Standing working hours was what Siwa Leung promised to do in his term. As of today, we don't have standard working hours. They call it contract working hours. What is meant by contract working hours? And that is a snapshot of you when you passed away. Donald Tsang promised to introduce minimum wages, and he introduced a voluntary charter, and he said he would legislate. If that didn't work, I lodged a judicial review, and he accused me of starting a lawsuit just for the sake of votes. Now, he said that we already got a voluntary minimum wage agreement involving scrupulous employers and their employees. And for the security guards, they've taken the lead to introduce minimum wage for 8-hour shifts. Has Siwa Leung done anything to this effect? Do you want me to lodge a judicial review? So I may not have enough money. You have started a lawsuit to disqualify me.
Madam Deputy, we have a few million people in the workforce. This is the working hours that they are putting up with. This working hours system is the source of so many problems. I've said this many times, and I repeat, if you don't work overtime, you're likely to be sacked. There is no secure tenure, and if you work longer hours, you don't get paid for it. Madam Deputy, third, without standard working hours, you don't get compensated for exertion. It's hard for you to get compensation for the overtime work. Even if you get compensated for the overtime work, you may suffer from problems because of prolonged working hours. I may sacrifice my health for money, but by the time I die, at least I should get compensated. An employer is imposing all these exertion on me. There should be compensation for death arising from physical exertion. And employers should be responsible for recompensing the workers who die from physical exertion. Are you going to do this? Madam Deputy, we've heard all these horrific tragedy. There was a minibus driver who was an old man. He's having a flu and didn't take any day off, and he carried on driving and ran over someone. He got arrested for dangerous driving, causing grievous bodily harm. The Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, the China construction, and Zhenwo, that has been taken over by another company. Now these are two state companies, and they are driving roughshod over the workers, and they have a bad reputation. They build bridges in Africa, Jakarta, Manila, and the bridges collapsed, and their officials were done for corruption, and this is causing casualties. Are the workers' lives are worth nothing? You're not imposing any standard working hours. And I think it's only right that we slash his pay. Furthermore, excessive working hours are causing other problems, and the jobs are so fragmented. If an employer needs someone who work for 16 hours, then you make someone work for 12 hours and get someone else to do the remaining 4 hours. So one person would be doubling up somebody else's job. That's precisely why they're introducing the LIFA. I said before, and I say again, that there was a woman whose husband is out of a job, and the woman got a job, and they were so happy that husband works in a bar making $12,000. And a woman was hired instead to replace the husband, and she gets paid $9,000 instead of $12,000. And they are cutting up the long shift, and there are some people who want to supplement their income to pay for the tuition fees and the school fees. And these women workers are subject to exploitation because there is a lack of standard working hours. The government is a large employer. Madam Deputy, you must be aware of that. They are outsourcing the jobs, and they are saying that there are standard working hours. But the fact remains that the contractors are being inhumane to the outsourced workers. And Madam Deputy, I was doing the community service, and there was a woman next to me, and I said I stormed the police, and I was imposed the community working orders, and the woman got into trouble with the law, and she was imposed 240 hours of community service. Now that woman is very strong physically, and she has to water the plants on the roadside. She has to trim the plants on the roadside. And we don't have any protection under the law for working hours. Madam Deputy, on this particular question, it doesn't make sense to talk any further. We have Mr. Paul Chan here in 2011. You said something. I did support you at that time, and you said that the shares of the public service can be sold, and we can get $100 billion to run the universal retirement protection. You're now the FS. Will you be telling Carrie Lam that if you want me to be the FS next time, then you have to live up to the expectation of long hair? In 2011, I criticized the SAR government. Now you have become the FS in the SAR government. Are you bold enough to tell Carrie Lam that we have to live up to the expectation of long hair if you want me to be the FS? If you're going to do this, then I'm going to buy you beer. Or are you not going to do it? Councillor Chan, or I should say FS Chan, why don't you come back to being a councillor? Be bold. Go tell Carrie Lam, Mr. Leung, you have to come back to the subject. Well, it's hard to see Mr. Paul Chen. In 2011, I did have a lot of respect for you. Today, you're going to lose my respect. You're not going to do it. I've been filibustering over the years in order to attain the universal retirement protection, and our filibuster is being cut short. I will certainly file a judicial review against him. Mr. Paul Chen, as a councillor, you haven't experienced filibustering. If you want to stop filibustering, you have to be true to your words. Now, you can make the government sell the shares. If you don't sell the shares, fine. You can be committed to it. Do you have any faith in him? It is only reasonable that we don't have any faith in the government because they never live up to their pledges. Now, I may get the $50 billion funding. Now, I supported you in 2011. Please go ahead with it. Quick. Mr. Roy Quallen. Madam Deputy, following on from the amendment that I referred to last time, all we can do is to slash the remuneration of the officials who are not doing a good enough job, and I will have a go at Lau Kong Wah. I think we have to try our best to make sure that they will not get the pay rise so easily. We're not unjustified. I must reiterate that as Secretary for Home Affairs, Lau Kong Wah has done virtually nothing. He didn't say a single word regarding the policies. Now, I talked about a hidden agenda. Where has he been? Where has he disappeared to? I think he has disappeared to the Venice Biennale. And as the Secretary for Home Affairs, he's showing concern about these art events. Industrial building falls within his purview. He's not done a single thing. He's never liberalized the restrictions. There are many people who may have different ambitions. Some are into music, some are into other types of creative art, and they are in industrial buildings pursuing their endeavors. There ought to be someone in the government who would move our cultural policy ahead with times. We have a good soil for art and culture in Taiwan, and in other parts of the world there are so many examples that are so good. I mean, Hong Kong is really horrendous. Those who are jamming music are being arrested, and you may say that they get into trouble and they have to be arrested, they have to be prosecuted. True, but the fact is that what is the HAB, which is responsible for art and culture, doing? I haven't seen them doing anything, and they are sitting idly by and let people in the art and culture sectors being suppressed. I'm well justified in slashing his pay. Now, he has done a bad job regarding the industrial buildings. The youth hostel, we haven't seen any progress there. If Lau Kong Wah is so good, then he can say that we have to wait for the land to become available before the youth hostel will be up and running. Now, this was mentioned in 2011. It's got nothing to do with us because we have to have land becoming available. Now, if you think that youth hostel is important, why don't you say something? Why don't you do something to coordinate and to identify land for youth hostels to be coming on stream? He's saying that there are some projects that have a completion date. There will be a dozen or few dozen of units that would become available to address the hardship of the young people and that they're not able to get on the housing ladder. Now, over the years, all you managed to do is to make available a dozen or so units. He hasn't done anything at all. Now, when he attended panel meetings, he said that there would be units that would be set to be completed, but there are some projects that are getting into trouble. Now, if you pin your hope on the SHA to take this forward, then you'll be doomed. Now, he can't do a good job with youth hostel, and also the whole series of golf courses, the yacht club, and so on, the recreational lease, and the luxurious clubhouses. The secretary said that they have to build the youth hostels using government land, but they're allowing these recreational clubs to occupy such important land. Now, uniformed groups, it is fine, but yacht club, golf course, can they enjoy a nominal premium to be able to sit on these important land?
The membership fees range from $1,000 to $500,000, and the facilities include catering. And these marina clubs and golf courses cannot be enjoyed by poor people, but the government is only charging nominal fees. In Shengshui, the rent is only $1,000. So the HAB and Lau Kong-wah has to deal with this outdated regulation. Are you going to continue to allow people to develop golf courses and developments? And then an interdepartmental working group was established by the HAB in 2014. And 11 private recreational leases will lapse soon, but the review is still ongoing. So they are continuing their operations on short-term tenancies. It's been 3 years since 2014, but nothing has been done. So we should deduct the salaries of this secretary. And he's as deplorable as Mr. Eddie Ng, but he's smarter than Eddie Ng because he only said what he needed to. So by saying less, he could avoid a lot of mistakes. But if you look carefully, he should be held responsible. And he should do better with industrial buildings. The youth hostel project has basically disappeared, and he's refusing to work on sites such as marina clubs. Lau Kong-wah has set up an association, and he secured a site for training with the support of HAB, and $60 million was spent on renovation, of which $30 million came from the board of the Chinese permanent secretaries under the HAB. So he's giving priority to his own projects, but for other bodies such as Hidden Agenda or other groups in industrial buildings, they are being pushed into a corner. But and then you are telling us that there's no conflicts of roles. It's obvious that for things you want to work on, you only need to spend a few months or a year. But what about other projects? Nothing came to result. That's why I want to slash your salaries. You might say that $890,000 might not be able to help a lot of people, but that I still don't want to pay you that money. We have to give merit when needed, but we have to criticize Lau Kong-wah heavily. So what are we looking for in a good Secretary for Home Affairs? The HAB never worked on the policies I mentioned. Even Lisa Wang thinks that he's not doing a good job. I'm not sure what would happen in the next term of the government. Some secretaries might be gone, but I don't know about the government's plans. If Mr. Lau Kong-wah remains as Secretary for Home Affairs, Hong Kong's art and culture policy will certainly suffer. A lot of work is waiting to be done. And outdated ordinances for industrial buildings and industrial estates industrial buildings are not just used by young people. Let's look at countries like Korea. Korea has tremendous soft power. They have a cultural background. They have dramas, TV shows, and music, etc. They create a strong image for Korea, even though the image of Korea might not be as rosy as suggested in movies and TV dramas. Hong Kong used to have very substantial, strong soft power as well. In the 1980s, we had a lot of prominent singers, producers, and we made a voice globally, even though we are very small. But it has entered a recession beyond respite. Some people might say that it has nothing to do with the government, but just look at the government's policy on industrial buildings. You are asking for fire safety requirements. You have to satisfy the lands department, housing department, and leases are often cancelled. So that is the truth under the current policy, and the young people are saying that they will continue even if you try to arrest me. So what is the key to this dilemma? We need a responsible Home Affairs Bureau and Secretary, so they will continue with what they are doing, and they wouldn't care. The HAB can actually do a lot. In an ideal world, they should first tackle the private recreational leases so that golf courses and marina clubs have to pay reasonable market rents. That would generate revenue for the public. If they cannot operate, they should surrender their sites. The sites can be used for youth hostels, so they can fulfill what they promised in the 2011 policy address. That way you can create a supply and house young people in the youth hostels so that they can find home in this city. So where do we find the money? Money is needed, you might say. A lot of young people are dedicated to creativity. We shouldn't just rely on the financial sector, and a lot of people make money with their ideas. But they are often challenged by various ordinances. This outdated art and culture policy should be reviewed. If the Secretary wants, he should try to feel the vibes and attend some music concerts, attend pottery workshops, etc., so that he can feel the passion of these people. You should try to provide policy support so that they can fulfill their potential, and so that their works can be known outside of Hong Kong. So with all these three conditions, you can give hope to our youth. A hopeless secretary cannot come up with a hopeful policy. You know, you should get Andy Lau instead of Lau Kong Wah. Lau Kong Wah never did anything right. So I want to deduct his salaries because his name is Lau Kong Wah. I have my justifications. I'm not trying to pick on your past performances and how you can do better. Well, he never did anything. He never said anything. You know, he cannot do anything worse. His face is so thick, and he's making $890,000 in 3 months. And his strength is that despite all the criticisms, he can still put up a plastic smile. And we fail to help our young people in art and culture, and we have to put up with this secretary. So Hong Kong people has seen enough. That's why I proposed these deductions. So I want to deduct his salaries. Thank you. Dr. Kihe Kwok. Madam Deputy, when you look at our accountable officials, apart from Mrs. Siu, Mr. Wong Kam Seng is to be blamed as well because he didn't attend all the relevant sessions. But now Mr. Paul Chen is nowhere to be seen. And some officials might continue beyond this term, some might not, so morale is extremely low. But Hong Kong people really only care about whether you deserve your salaries. Since Mr. Siu is here, I want to talk about the manpower and labor policy. You did not attend the panel on manpower yesterday about the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. It's called a bridge of death, and a lot of construction workers are wondering when they are going to lose their lives at the bridge. The first incident occurred in 2012. The first casualty occurred at that time, and now, as of now, 10 lives have been claimed. After each death, there would be a stretch of peace, and after that, the casualties would return. The Labor Department, Highways Department, Development Bureau would make a visit, and they would just go through the motions, and the casualties would continue. And on the 25th of October 2012, there was 1 death and 14 injuries, and works were briefly suspended. And on the 19th of October 2019, at the bridge module at Scenic Hill collapsed. And on the 27th of April 2015, at a river terminal, a subcontractor died after being hit, and the works were resumed. And on the 27th of October 2015, a worker was hit by a metallic cage and gas cylinder and died. So 4 suspension notices were issued. And on 23rd of April 2016, a foreign worker fell into the water in the construction of the artificial island. And on the 29th of March this year, the safety strap was attached to the working platform, and no one paid attention to such ridiculous situation. Why didn't you have labor officers and safety officers? Well, they are not actually putting in their shifts. They would verify the paperwork. So eventually 2 more people died. And 20 suspension notices were given after receiving criticisms. On the 5th of this month, we had another incident. A 36-year-old worker was electrocuted, and his hands were hurt. And this was the 3rd injury in the month. And the total penalties amounted to less than $1 million at the Hong Kong Choi-Buay Bridge. And while the total project cost is $115.7 billion, well, they can pay 10 times or 100 times easily. They wouldn't care because they can try to obtain more funding allocations at the Finance Committee. Of course, this is not something the Labor Department can call. This is about the government and the conglomerates or Chinese conglomerates for the 2 Chinese groups, or even Chunwo. More than half the funds came from an Inner Mongolian conglomerate.
No wonder they could get the contracts. They don't have to worry that you give the contract to the lowest bid. Well, after the contract is signed, and if you do not pay them, they will not continue to work, and there can be further slippage. And then if there is a slippage, the other side will take you to task. The so-called National Planning and Commission will come and scold you. Of course, this is a chance for making profit, not for Hong Kong people, of course, but for China-owned consortia, the real developers. $115.7 billion. Of course, that's not the end of it. And we'll talk about $31.8 billion under the Leisure and Cultural Services Department for sports park in Kai Tak, and also $300 billion in 3-hour airs. I don't know how many lives will be claimed in these projects. And also the artificial island in Hong Kong waters, $400 billion. Everyone are looking at this fat piece of meat. Labor welfare, this is just a joke. Just a few days ago, a worker who had to work 20 hours a day jumped from height to take his life. He is survived by a wife and 2 young kids. So, CY Leung 689 like to boast how well Hong Kong is doing, and he led the delegation to the Greater Bay Area, and he will not claim responsibility for casualties and fatalities in industrial accidents. We'll talk about hundreds of billions of dollars money being swindled and spent and squandered in big white elephants, and we also sacrifice lives of Hong Kong people. So who will really fear and take the labor legislation seriously? The threshold for prosecution is high. These large consortia, China constructions and so forth, they have so many layers of subcontracting. And of course, the lowest subcontractor would be prosecuted. They are bound to be penalized. They have no choice but to do it for you. They have to cut corners. You are not going to arrest the chairman of Wang Hang or the chairman of China Construction? Of course not. They are senior officials of the mainland, so they can get what they want in Hong Kong. They can even deplete your $2,000 billion. For sure, our public coffers will be emptied by these white elephants in the pipeline. Well, since they are making so much from these projects, they should shoulder some responsibility. This government is beyond savage. They collude with the large consortia and state-owned enterprises. Have they tried to do anything to protect the grassroots workers? Of course not. Whether we talk about standard working hours or statutory minimum wage or industrial safety, it's useless. If our laws can catch the masterminds are behind all these, well, then they can be held accountable. At the end of the day, it's about how the legislation is drafted. But of course, this is not going to happen. Mr. Chen Kai-sen staged a show. He promised to review the legislation. I dare him to do that. They don't mind if, although 10 lives have been claimed, even another 10 lives would not matter. They're going to be fined a few $1 million. The secretary just now talked about this agreement with the two power companies for another 15 years. Please do not continue to erode our standards. And the sports policies are appalling because this is going to be another gold mine. Originally, we wanted an indoor sports ground. We want a soccer pitch. Now we have a big stadium for mega events, 60,000 square feet commercial space, and you're going to give them $60 million so that they can sell in bids. I think some of them have been earmarked to get the contracts. So, hard-earned money of taxpayers is being pulled down the drains by you. Yesterday, a large consortium has bought a piece of land at a few $100 billion, but it's just a fraction of the construction costs of the Hong Kong-Macau Bridge. And then these infrastructure projects are waiting to give away money. And with this environmental-friendly monorail system, we're going to spend tens of billions of dollars on a monorail system, which is not being used in other parts of the world. Yes, Secretary for Environment, this may have got nothing to do with you, but so long as the government uses the name of sports or environmental protection, they can get money. And also the WKCD is an independent empire. Henry Tang promised that $20 billion would be enough for that WKCD, and yet he is now no longer in the government. We're giving them hundreds of billions of dollars, and then senior officials can switch to serve in this authority to be chief executive officers. So senior officials or accountable officers, you don't have to worry. There are so many good positions waiting for you after retirement. This legislature is a tool manipulated by the executive. Well, we can only have 4, 3, 2, 1 minutes rounds in the FC and WSC. We cannot really ask any questions. We're asked to trust the government blindly. No questions to be asked. There are things that undermine our interest. The interest of Hong Kong is happening every day in this council. And infrastructure projects that claim workers alive, projects that squander our money. And all these are perfect opportunities for emptying our public coffers. And this president, I'm not talking about you, Madam Deputy, this president is even more eager than the administration. He decided to confine our debate to 60 hours so that the government needs to pay no heed to what we say. After they have sat through 60 hours, then the bill will be passed. What kind of a government, what kind of politics do we have here? Very soon we don't have to wait until 50 years have expired. We will be the same as the mainland. Corruption, bribery, fattening a few, all these are bound to happen in Hong Kong. And grassroots and the workers in Hong Kong are not going to have a chance. Thank you. Dr. Fernando Zhang. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I speak on Head 90 Labour. Dr. Kwokaki told us a lot about what happened yesterday at the Manpower panel regarding industrial accidents and injuries and fatalities of the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. We've always asked the Labour Department to face up to the fact that we have a very poor track record when it comes to industrial safety. Just the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge alone, 10 lives have been claimed, and over 600 workers have sustained injuries on the record. A whole lot of problems have been exposed. In our discussion with the Commissioner for Labour yesterday, I asked him what improvements he intended to introduce. Occupational health suffered, lives were claimed, and workers are not protected at all. I asked whether he was satisfied with the current situation, and he said that compared with the general situation, the HAZMB was not doing a bad job. Of course, he dared not say that he was satisfied. He, of course, said that even one life lost is one too many, and one accident is one too many. And he talked about seminars and reviewing international legislation to see whether penalties can be increased. All right, reviewing the laws and also the penalties, fine. But when can that be done? He could give us no timetable, so it was all empty talk. And the last, FC, and even in the PWSC, we've really pointed out that this is a mammoth project. The principal contractor had a very poor track record, as mentioned by some other members. China Bay had a very poor record in Indonesia, Malaysia, or Harbin. Their bridge built by this company collapsed. there were fatal accidents. How come this contractor could be given the contract? How come industrial safety accounted for only 3% of the score, whereas the price accounted for 60%? How come the industrial safety supervisor or officer on site was employed by the contractor and only accountable to the contractor? So this is asking the contractor to monitor himself. The system must be revamped. Because much of the works is done at sea, we asked for the provision of safety vests and also other safety devices, but none has been provided. We asked a lot of questions, but no answers were given. Hong Kong 01, the media group, went on a visit to the site, and it was discovered that many workers just work there without any safety vest, no safety harness, no safety belt. The scaffolding was just next to the pillar, and there was not even a foothold for them to stand on.
One media's visit to the sea has discovered so much already. I don't want to just concentrate on Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. I'm talking about labor issues in Hong Kong in general. We are most famous for low wages and long hours. Hong Kong is famous. Last year, Credit Suisse did a survey, and it was found that on the average, the weekly working hours were 36.5 for the world, but in Hong Kong it's 50 or 38% higher than the world average. Compared to the one that ranks second, it is Bombay in India. People there work 43.75 hours a week, less than 44. We have been discussing standard working hours since 2013 when we set up the committee, and now it's 2017. We haven't achieved any progress. This term of government has listed this as a major labor issue to be dealt with, but they have not done anything. And the Credit Suisse survey also discovered that on the average, labor workers in Hong Kong have 17 days public holidays, but overall in the world it's 23. We have said many years that general holidays should be aligned with labor holidays. There are 15 labor holidays only. Many grassroots workers enjoy 5 days less public holidays. Why can't we even standardize the practice? It has been talked for a long time, but it's still on the drawing board. And also low wages, Madam Deputy. On the 1st of May, we raised the SMW to $34.5 per hour. In 2011, we started to have SMW. A review is done every 2 years. It's very rare in the world that people review SMW every 2 years only. It's true that not every place has the SMW, but those that have, the majority have SMW, and those that do not are paying much more, just like in the Scandinavian countries. Their wages are negotiated amongst the unions, the government, and the business sector. So their lowest wages are higher than those countries that have SMW. But we have had this for so many years, and yet still we are only paying $34.50. I have some data for last year, Madam Deputy. Canada, over $73 per hour. UK, $81 and more. Holland over $88, Ireland over $89, New Zealand $90, Belgium over $92, France over $98, Australia 116 and more. But in Hong Kong it's $34.50, and it has just been raised. We are an advanced city. Other people are talking about a country, and individual cities in these countries usually pay even more than those I read out. We are paying 30 odd, but compared to Australia, we are not even 1/3 of the SMW there. It's more or less 1/4. Our work ethics is very high in Hong Kong. People are very happy to be self-reliant and work for the livelihood, but we are giving them the short change. Yesterday at the Manpower panel, we just knew that the median wages stand at 16,000, or a 4% jump from last year. For many years already, our median wage has not moved an inch, but now from over 10,000 going up to 16,000, I think we have done quite well. But frankly speaking, $16,000 wouldn't help you keep a family. Not to talk about keeping a family. Even if you want to sustain just yourself, you are paying the larger part of that for rent. And the 90 percentile would tell you that people are earning 40,000 only. So half of the people who work in Hong Kong are earning less than 16,000, because 16,000 is the median wage. So people can't even sustain a living. They can't find a place to live. 2 days ago, I visited a street sleepers hostel. A young person told me he is working, but he can't find enough money to rent a place. He said there's nothing he could do. Either he goes for CSSA, but that's not something he desires. So he works, but he can't pay rent. Rent is easily 4,000, 5,000 for a subdivided unit. And if you want a place of your own after getting married, you need to have 10,000 odd to pay rent, because then you will have a family. So our labor market is totally distorted. We have worked on this for so many years. There is no wage protection, no standard working hours. We are still lagging far behind others. Now let me talk about the offsetting mechanism. Again, C.Y. Leung assumed office and he promised he would deal with it. But today you have just pointed out the direction. At a recent special FC meeting, the secretary said that before he leaves his office, he would decide on an option. But there are just 2 more months to go. Do you think you can iron out all the differences? I think, again, you are going to leave it with the next government. Carrie Lam said this when I met her recently. She said she is determined to deal with the offsetting mechanism. Well, I will have my eyes peeled. I hope that these practices that go against retirement protection must be treated cautiously, and this kind of offsetting mechanism must not stay. When MPF was set up, it was very clear that it was to provide retirement protection to workers. The offsetting mechanism should have nothing to do with retirement protection. In his opening remarks for the FC meetings, he also talked about importing labor, foreign labor, work for ethnic minorities. And I'd like to address the ethnic minorities issue. The secretary admitted frankly, that only in 2 districts where at the Labor Department Employment Office, they have engaged a person with ethnic minority language skills to assist the labor officers. But again, you are only scratching the surface. At certain employment centers, the Labor Department is engaging employment ambassadors who are ethnic minorities. They have read YTEP and they have been an intern for 6 months. So these young people are supposed to help other ethnic minorities, young people, but this is too good to be true. Why don't you directly engage ethnic minorities to be employment officers? We have said that there should be an employment matching scheme for the ethnic minorities, so they are given dedicated service. You talk about a dedicated counter, but it doesn't exist. When the ethnic minorities go to the Labor Department offices, you just cannot see this counter, and there is nobody helping them to do translation. About foreign domestic helpers, there has been report saying that they have very little protection. Some of them sleep in toilets or behind kitchens. The intermediaries are exploiting them, and we can't help them in any way. Madam Deputy, I don't think 15 minutes are enough, and I have just spoken on manpower, and yet there are so many issues I cannot cover. I hope the next term of government can rectify these wrongdoings. Mr. Chan Chi-chin, would you like to speak again? Thank you, Madam Deputy. Madam Deputy, this is the 6th debate. I am the first proposer for this debate, so I have already spoken once. In this entire debate on the appropriation bill, I have proposed 67 amendments, and 45 were approved for by the President. But in every debate, on the average, I could speak only twice, once at the beginning, once at the end. And this one is my second speech in this debate. And I only have 4 amendments for this debate, but in my first speech, I talked about the printing cost of TSA papers, and I couldn't even finish that in 15 minutes, and of course my time was up. Cutting or slashing the estimate for the 20th anniversary celebrations. I will be speaking on this one here, but I will have no time for the Labor Department issues. I'd like to tell the public again that the President has only approved 185 amendments and 60 hours for debate. To be fair, those who are watching will know that we have spent very little time on quorum counts. Now there are just 4 members in the chamber. And I don't even have enough time to speak on my own amendments, not to mention supporting or objecting to other members' amendments, not to mention those members or responding to those members who have not moved amendments but whose speeches I do not agree with. In this debate, some pro-establishment members spoke up, and I do encourage that. I remember Mr. Chan Kok-kwan said this last year, where I think he was such a funny guy in that he said, why is it that you Democrats only talked about TSA as if TSA was the only issue in the education realm? Of course not. Of course, there are many education issues we'd like to address. Apart from TSA, there is Eddie Ng. Also, the fees for exchange on the mainland and overseas, but we don't have time. Because with the arrangement of the President, we don't even have enough time to talk about TSA and retort the nonsense of Eddie Ng. So, Mr. Chan Kwok-kwan, if you think our discussion is not comprehensive so that education is equated with TSA, then you should stand on our side and ask for more time from the President with us. If we have unlimited rounds to speak, I'm sure those who spoke on education would not just talk about TSA. And also, I have now to retort what Mr. Eddie Ng said when he responded to members last week. Mr. Ng retorted our speeches without any sense. He is named a secretary for overseas visits. Some members said that his salaries should be slashed, and of course I support it. And he only conducted fewer study visits overseas than SCED. It's not that we think secretaries should not conduct overseas visits. Every one of them does. But do you have to go so often compared to other bureau secretaries and previous bureau education secretaries? And what did he say about it? He said if there is a bureau secretary doing the visit, you can talk about issues at a high level and people would give you higher regard for those issues. Well, of course I know. Secretary, if you send a political assistant or your secretary to call me up, I would take a longer time to return the call instead of you calling me up. So does it mean that you have to do everything yourself? Do you have to go to every country in order to get a paper or document so you get it a few days earlier?
If the civil servants ask for documents, it may take a month for them to get the reply. But if it is done by the secretary, then things can get faster. That's right. Later on, we have the Belt and Road Initiative. Does it mean that the secretary will visit every region in the Belt and Road? We are still discussing about this Belt and Road Scholarship Fund at the FC. So does it mean that Mr. Ng will visit every country in that region? And also, for many fellow members have said this, Mr. Eddie Ng attended only one session of the public hearing of the TSA. Then he went to the Chateau Chamber of Commerce function. He had his own reason. He said that he attended one session. Originally, it was supposed to be held in one session so that he made arrangements afterwards. Well, this is not the first time we hold a public hearing on TSA. Every time that was done, while hundreds of organizations will come to give views, you should have reserved the whole evening to listen to views of the education workers, parents, and so on. But you have provided time for only one session. You know that that would not be the case. And he also said that this going to this celebration function of this association, if we're talking about an education organization hosting this function, then there might be good reasons why he should go. But we are talking about the Chateau Chiushan Merchants Association only. His reply was that, well, it was useful because there were so many representatives of chambers of commerce there, so that could help take forward life planning for students. How outrageous. So Mr. Xiu Kai-wai said that, yes, it's life planning, but then it's the life planning for Mr. Ng himself for the remaining part of his life. He would get to know more friends and meet more people from the business sector. So I think we should support all amendments which seek to reduce the secretary's salary, whether it's going to be 1 month, 3 months, or 1 year's pay. And next, I would like fellow members to support my amendment number 159, and that is to cut the printing costs for exam papers for the TS or BCA. So and the amount is $1.68 million.
if we cut that amount, does it mean that we can stop the test to be held in June? Now, first, my motive for moving this amendment is to call a halt to the BCA. The oral exam last time was held on a random basis, but for the written test next month is going to be conducted territory-wide. 35 members have joined in a signature campaign to oppose the resumption of the TSA or BCA. Our stance is very clear. Some pro-establishment members might be softening their stance too. And this past Monday, we met with the CS4A, Mr. Matthew Zhang, and only one pro-establishment member, Mr. Michael Tan, was with us. But in relation to voting for amendment number 159, I hope that those who have put their names to the joint petition to ask for the halt of the BCA or TSA this year, please support my amendment. This will send a clear message to the current term government, C.Y. Leung's government, Mr. Eddie Ng. And this message is clear in that we would support Mrs. Carrie Lam's election pledge and help her implement or realize this pledge, and that is to shelve the BCA P3 test. I believe that parents and schools see that we have voted to oppose this test. While the president may say that we may cut the amount, $1.68 million, but somewhere else they would be able to get the amount again for this purpose. So the amount can easily be recovered from other places. Actually, the test papers have already been printed, I'm sure. So they would have money to pay for it, definitely. But that's not so simple an issue. I think we should, the electrical as a whole, give a clear message to the schools and parents that we are standing on your side, and we believe that there should be a resumption of the BCA this year. Even though the government is adamant, this sunset government disregards public opinion and insists on its way, then it will still be useful. Why? Because on Monday, we met with Matthew Zhang. We told him repeatedly that if you have to take the initiative to stop it, then it's totally impossible. It will be too embarrassing for you. But then can you give out a clear message to Hong Kong people, to the P3 students and their parents and schools and teachers and school sponsoring bodies, to tell them that you can think about this yourself. If you don't like to take the test and you think that there will not be any scores to be settled afterwards and that you will not be blamed. So whether it's the secretary or the undersecretary for education, we're not even willing to do that. What they were saying now is that if parents believe that there are some problems or have issues, they can approach or liaise with the schools. That's all they want to say. Then what happens afterwards if they approach or liaise with the schools? Will there be any blacklist or settling of schools afterwards? No, they will not venture into those issues. So can we ask? Then can you tell them categorically that there will not be any bad consequences if they don't take the test? No, they said no. Then they will go again to talk to the schools. So if you say that you have alternative thinking, then you would not like to test them, maybe they will come and counsel you and try to exert pressure on you. But then if the legislature can pass this amendment, then schools, teachers, and other associations and parents would get the confidence they need. And that is to say, the whole society, including the electrical, does not support this. And only the few education government officials are trying to still insist, and we're trying to help you here. We help you through passing this motion, or amendment rather. And some government officials said that there are many schools who would like to take the BCA. Well, okay, that's all right. Those who would like to take it, just take it, well, once, twice, 3 times, that's all right. But there are so many others who don't want to take the BCA. So what we are asking now is that they can choose to take part or not. For those schools who would like to take the BCA to make their own assessment, it's just like doing a health checkup. People will give you a report telling you your physical conditions and what needs to be worked on and so on. So some schools think that that's the best approach because somebody will be doing health checks for your children, and that's good. That's the analogy. Now, if you do health checks-ups, then, the parties involved do not have to suffer. But then there is a lot of suffering, a pain in the BCA. You tell people not to drill. You are chanting out all sorts of slogans and mantras, asking people not to do excessive drilling. He said that 50 schools were selected on a random basis, and now the scheme will be extended territory-wide. If you are talking about a test or a pilot, you have to respect those who are in the pilot. You have to be mindful of whether those who have been selected are willing to do it or not. If they think that it's a painful experience, then they have the right to choose to opt out. Well, I made an analogy to the Nazis party in Germany. Chairman, call for quorum.
呢項辯論現在結束。
This debate has now come to a close. The committee will now put to vote the amendments.